Never go to the second location. Always trust your gut.
Hello, my name is Chrissy Champagne, and you are listening to Residue, a true crime podcast dedicated to keeping you paranoid. Here on Residue, I tell you the truth behind your favorite true crime movies, and today we are talking about a made-for-TV movie, Soldier's Girl. This movie is based on the murder of Barry Winchell. Before we begin today's episode, I just want to remind you, you can follow me on Instagram at Residue Podcast, Facebook, Residue a True Crime Podcast, and TikTok at Residue Podcast. And as you know, the greatest thing you could possibly do for any podcaster that you love is leave a positive review. This review just popped up on my phone as a notification from Spotify, and it made me laugh, and I just have to share it with you. This is from Kristen, and she writes, 3 days. 3 days of at least 12 to 14 hours of listening to this podcast. I found you randomly on Spotify when looking for a podcast about a particular true crime case, and I have not stopped listening for 3 days. I think it might be like 50 episodes in. I'm not sure anymore. Send caffeine and a new pair of headphones. I'm going to need them. This is amazing. I'm obsessed. Thank you so much, Kristen, and thank you so much to everyone who has left the most amazing reviews. And I know I say it every week, but we have to stop for a moment here. I have to thank each and every one of you for downloading, for following. You're going to make me cry right now. I got the news yesterday that Residue actually charted on the U.S. Apple podcast top 200, and not even top 200. You guys got Residue to the top 100, and I have only you to thank. It's making me tear up right now. This is like a huge moment for a podcaster. This is basically like in That Thing You Do when the Wonders or the Oneaters, however you care to say their name, when they hear their song on the radio for the first time. That is how you guys made me feel yesterday, and I couldn't thank you more. Thank you so much for being here. The Resi crew is the greatest crew forever. And before we begin today's episode, I must remind you that listener discretion is always advised. Soldier's Girl is a 2003 made-for-TV movie that first premiered on Showtime, and it is based on the real-life story of U.S. Army soldier Barry Winchell and his relationship with Calpernia Addams, a transgender performer. This film explores their romance, the hostility that Barry faced from fellow soldiers, and the events that led to his murder in 1999. Right off the bat, I'm going to tell you this movie is a rough watch. Took me a couple days to finish it. I had to stop it a few times. It is very well done. And I do have to say that Sean Hatosy, who stars in this film as Justin Fisher, he's fantastic. Sean Hatosy always plays the creepiest, greatest character, like the kind of character that you just can't stand because he plays his role so well. Also starring in Soldier's Girl is Troy Garrity, Lee Place, Andre Brower, and Philip Ettles. The film is directed by Frank Pearson, and this film did receive a lot of award nominations. At the 2003 Emmy Awards, it was nominated for Outstanding Director and also Outstanding Prosthetic Makeup. And the film did win at the Gotham Independent Film Awards for Breakthrough Actor Lee Pace. Lee Pace portrays Calpernia Addams, and his performance was actually highlighted the most from this film, saying that it was such a sensitive and human portrayal of a deeply painful story. And this made-for-television film receives high praise on Rotten Tomatoes, giving it an 88% critic and an 87% audience. A list of quick reviews for you. All three principal performers are superb. Another review states that Soldier's Girl is not only the best film ever made by and for Showtime, it is one of the best pictures of 2003. It was so beautiful and sad, absolutely incredible, 5 stars all around. And beyond its artistic success, Soldier's Girl had a real cultural impact because it brought renewed attention to the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy, and it sparked conversations about LGBTQ rights in the military. It is July 3rd, 1999, a long holiday weekend ahead for soldiers at Fort Campbell, a major U.S. Army base that sits along the Kentucky-Tennessee border between Hopkinsville and Clarksville. And while its official address is in Kentucky, most of the installation actually lies across the state line in Tennessee. The post is home to elite units including the 101st Airborne Division and the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. Named after William Bowen Campbell, the base is typically a place defined by discipline, routine, and readiness. But like anywhere else, the start of a long weekend brings a different kind of energy. 21-year-old Barry Winchell, a private first class assigned to the 2nd Battalion 502nd Infantry of the 101st Airborne Division, was getting ready to party with his roommate, 25-year-old Justin Fisher. Now, along with them were fellow soldiers A.J. Hoffman and Calvin Glover. Calvin Glover was only 18 years old. So these guys are hanging out, partying, drinking, letting loose. Only problem is Calvin can't really handle his alcohol. He's 18, he's younger than the other guys, and he's trying to keep up. And they're kind of joking around with him. They're kind of playing around with him, not really bullying him, but, teasing him. He doesn't like it. And he gets into an argument with Barry Winchell. Now, the soldiers say that Calvin was, quote, beyond wasted. He was annoying everyone, especially Barry. So he and Barry start wrestling around on the ground, kind of fighting a little harder than just joking, and a platoon officer walks over, breaks it up. They both stand up, and Barry immediately apologizes to the platoon officer, and he's like, okay, we're just kidding around, everything's fine, and he reaches out to Calvin to shake his hand, and Calvin's like, no. Hell no, I'm not shaking your hand. Calvin is not going to let this go. But the very next day, July 4th, the guys are all out grilling again. They're all having fun. And as the afternoon goes on, Justin Fisher, Barry's roommate, continues to egg Calvin Glover on. Justin Fisher just won't let this go. He keeps digging it into Calvin Glover's head that, oh my God, you got beat by Barry. And the thing is that all of these soldiers have been relentlessly bullying 21-year-old Barry Winchell for weeks because Barry was dating Calpernia Addams. Calpernia was a dancer at a nightclub in downtown Nashville called The Connection, and in March of 1999, these soldiers went downtown to The Connection just to have a fun night, have some drinks, and watch the girls dance. This bar, The Connection, was a bar that featured transgender performers. So Barry Winchell meets Calpernia Addams that night, and they just instantly hit it off. Calpernia grew up in Nashville, Tennessee. She served in the U.S. Navy, where she worked in a medical role supporting service members, and near the end of her military service, she came out as a transgender woman. She later chose the name Calpernia, inspired in part by Shakespeare's Julius Caesar and influenced by a tombstone reference she saw in the film The Addams Family. Calpernia is drop-dead gorgeous. I am telling you right now, and so lovely. You can see some interviews with Calpernia in the American Justice episode, which I did use as one of my main sources for today's episode, and I have that linked in the show notes. Calpernia is just so calming and lovely when she speaks. You can instantly see how Barry fell immediately in love with her. A romance begins and the two start dating on the weekends, but far away from the base because Calpernia says that she realizes that this could be dangerous for Barry. He's in the Army and she is a transgender woman. So they're taking their romance a little farther away from the base. But that does not stop Barry's roommate, 25-year-old Justin Fisher, from constantly bullying him, starting rumors about him. It's nonstop. Barry becomes the target of extreme harassment to which nobody stopped these men from constantly bullying Barry. Barry Winchell was born in 1977 in Kansas City, and his parents divorced as a child. He was raised by his mother and his stepfather. So Barry was your all-American teenage boy. He was tall, he was strong, athletic, and he was, quote, a guy's guy. He was in a band. He played bass and he loved to play his bass loud, his mother said. At age 20, he enlisted in the Army to earn money for technical school. And while he is in the Army, he excelled. And by May of 1998, he's sent to Fort Campbell, 101st Airborne. It is here that he realizes he found his calling. And this is when he was up in a helicopter. He was up there and realized, oh my God, this is what I want to do with my life. I want to become a helicopter pilot. And Barry also had this amazing reputation as a great marksman. In fact, all of the other guys called him Top Gun. And Calpernia says she remembers the first night that Barry ever walked into the club, the Connection, because he was so handsome, strikingly handsome, and he was humble and sweet. Barry's bunkmate, though, Justin Fisher, not so much. None of those great qualities. He was very narcissistic. He was very vicious. He was a bully. Justin goes hard on Barry for having this relationship with Calpernia, constantly calling him a homosexual to all the other soldiers. And he's not using that word. He is using the F word, which I absolutely refuse to say. And all of the other soldiers are believing this. And Calpernia says, they fell in love very quickly, and she was in the process of transitioning. And Barry seemed completely comfortable with that. She explains Barry wasn't gay. He was attracted to women. He was attracted to Calpernia, a beautiful woman. And you know what? It didn't matter. It wouldn't matter if Barry was gay. But for some reason, this relationship does not sit well with his fellow soldiers. And they all assume that, of course, he had to be gay. And for some weird-ass reason, this makes them all uncomfortable. And the soldiers start shunning him. And of course, Justin is the most vicious of all of the soldiers, and that is Barry's roommate. So, it's 4th of July, 1999, and 18-year-old Calvin Glover is beyond drunk again. And he's being pushed by Justin Fisher again. Justin just insisting, haha, yesterday Barry beat you up. You better do something about it. You don't want people to think that a gay man beat you up. So the party starts to wind down. It's pretty late at night, and all of the soldiers start to go to bed. But 2 soldiers stay awake and they keep drinking. Everyone is asleep. All of the lights are off in these barracks. And these 2 soldiers, Justin and Calvin, who are already extremely wasted, again, for the second night in a row, they stay awake and they're playing cards and they're drinking. Now, they're in Barry and Justin's room, but Barry wasn't in the room because Barry was on dog watch that night, which I think is adorable. Now, the company had a dog and they would take turns watching the dog, but Justin, of course, hated the dog. Of course, Justin hated dogs. Come on now. And he didn't want that dog in their room, so Barry would take a cot outside into the hallway, and he would sleep with the dog next to him. So Barry's out in the hallway on a cot. These 2 are in the room drinking, and Justin is relentless in telling Calvin, you better go do something about this. You better get up and you better show that guy that you're a man. You better get up and do something. And Calvin just can't take it anymore. He says, I wasn't thinking that Barry could die when I went into that hallway. I wasn't thinking at all. And Calvin grabbed a bat, a baseball bat. He walked into the hallway. He stood over Barry's cot. Barry is asleep, has no idea this is going on. And he brings that bat down onto Barry's head. And he says that once Barry saw what was going on, and Barry felt what was happening. He's been hit by a bat. He woke up. He jumped. He was frantic. He was like, what is going on? Calvin says that he freaked out when Barry jumped up, and he just instinctively, it was a reflex. He hit him again, about 3 or 4 times, in the head and in the neck. And then Calvin just takes off. Calvin runs in to Justin's room again, and he says that Justin hugged him. It is around 2:30 a.m. on July 5th, and A.J. Hoffman, who was hanging out with the 3 men before on the 4th of July at the barbecue, he says that everyone hears this alarm go off, and they can't figure out where the alarm is coming from. So A.J. jumps out of his bed, and he starts running from floor to floor. He realizes that the fire alarm has been pulled on the 3rd floor. He runs up to the 3rd floor, and he sees Barry Winchell, covered in blood, on his cot, bleeding from his eyes, his nose, his mouth, and his ears. And AJ says that there were, quote, tiny blood bubbles coming from Barry's mouth. So he was still alive when AJ got up there to him. So AJ runs through the hallways, just banging on doors, just trying to help, and nobody is answering any of these doors. So he rushes downstairs to get help. And he brings people back upstairs. And when they return upstairs, he sees Justin Fisher outside of his room, just screaming and kneeling down next to Barry's body and screaming, "Help me. I don't know what happened. Help me. I don't know what to do. Somebody's got to do something." It took 30 minutes for the paramedics to arrive. And at this point, Barry is barely alive. This is when AJ notices that 18-year-old Calvin Glover is just standing off in the distance, looking very suspicious. And when he notices AJ looking at him, Calvin just turns around and flees. Now, by the morning, the CID had secured this entire area, and the CID is Criminal Investigative Division. They secure the area, and now this is a crime scene. They say that there was blood 13 feet across the hall from where Barry was laying and 18 feet up onto the ceiling from his cot. And they start questioning everybody in the vicinity. They start to realize, Calvin Glover is missing. And AJ tells them, I saw him and he fled. They end up finding his bloody covered jeans in a dumpster. And then they go into his room and they find some bloody gloves in his room. So Calvin Glover is suspect number one. Calvin Glover was born in Sulphur, Oklahoma, and he had a difficult and unstable childhood after his parents separated. He often spent time in youth homes whenever family issues would arise, and reports from a psychologist later suggested that he struggled with low self-esteem and he was vulnerable to alcohol use and outside influence. And this is largely because he sought attention and approval from others. At around age 13, he moved in with his father, but his behavior got worse, and his mother described him as becoming increasingly out of control, drinking at a young age, struggling in school, and associating with older peers who influenced him negatively. And after dropping out of school in 8th grade, he was placed in a youth counseling program. And at 17, with his mother's permission, he enlisted in the United States Army. But it wasn't because he really wanted to join the Army. It was because he got in trouble with the law, and they said, hey, you either go to prison or you go to the Army. And so he chose the Army. In the early morning hours on July 5th, 1999, in Kansas City, Missouri, Barry's parents receive a phone call. His mother, Patricia, and his stepfather, Wally, they receive a call being told that they need to get to Nashville as quick as possible because their son was, quote, kicked in the head by another soldier. They have no idea what's going on. They get on a plane, and by 4 p.m., they arrive in Nashville only to witness their son in a hospital bed, his eyes black, his face completely swollen. They are shocked by what Barry looks like. He's got IVs in his body, and doctors tell the family that there's no brain activity, and there is not much that they can do to save his life at this point. I get so emotional talking about this part because I can imagine Patricia and Wally just on the plane, and it takes so long to get there and you have no idea what's wrong with your child. I mean, all they were told is that he was kicked in the head, and then they arrive and they see this, and then they're being told he has no brain activity. And Patricia just sat by her son's bed the entire night. And she waited until the morning, and she told the doctors to turn off the life support. And Barry was pronounced dead at 10 a.m. on July 6th. On that 4th of July night in 1989, when Barry was beaten to death by one of his fellow soldiers, Calpernia Addams, the woman he was dating at the time, was actually competing in the Miss Tennessee Entertainer of the Year pageant, and she won. She had no idea what was happening to her partner, Barry Winchell. Back at the crime scene, Calvin Glover is tracked down and immediately charged, but they also charge Justin Fisher. Now, Justin Fisher told detectives that Calvin Glover attacked Barry with a baseball bat, and then he came into Justin's room, and Justin didn't know what to do. He ran to the fire alarm to alert someone that they needed help. That isn't the truth, according to Calvin Glover. A press release immediately goes out, and in this press release, they state that there was a, quote, altercation, but that seemed to downplay what actually happened here. The Army did not want to come forward with information on what actually went inside of those books. But reports start coming forward that this was all because of Barry's relationship with Calpernia and because of rumors and bullying. Now, the Fort Campbell Army base is legendary. So people realize, there has to be more to this story. Emails and phone calls start coming in from soldiers to the SLDN, which is the Service Members Legal Defense Network. And all of these tips were saying that they believed this murder to be a hate crime and that the Army was trying to cover it up. On July 13th, Kathy Westcott, an advocate for gay service members, calls the Army command and says, "I believe Barry was killed because of his perceived homosexuality." So the Army is starting to feel this increasing pressure because they have to admit that there is a climate of harassment existing on base. They don't want to admit that this could have been because of this pressure and this bullying. And so they want to keep it quiet, but Barry's murder is making national headlines. They just want this case closed. They want it to be over with. But Calvin Glover is charged and Justin Fisher is charged with accessory to murder. And this story becomes huge. I mean, a gay soldier at Fort Campbell getting killed by another soldier. So Kathy Westcott is pushing for the Army to investigate further, and Army Command refused to comment. Calvin Glover is assigned defense counsel from within the Army, and his defense attorney says that he is just this awkward and shy, scared, confused little kid. This defense attorney is adamant that this crime, this murder, had absolutely nothing to do with Barry's sexuality. Calvin was adamant he had absolutely no idea that Barry was even being harassed. He didn't see none of that. And he says that there was absolutely no gay activity going on in the unit. In the fall of 1999, a deal is struck with Justin Fisher. He agrees to cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for a 12-and-a-half-year sentence. However, Barry Winchell's mother believed that Fisher should have received life in prison instead of this reduced sentence because this agreement became an important part of the wider case against Calvin Glover. So the trial began on December 7th, 1999, and Glover's defense argued that the killing was not a hate crime, but rather the result of a prior altercation that left him feeling humiliated by rumors about his own sexuality. And the defense claimed those rumors, combined with influence from Justin Fisher, those rumors played a major role in escalating the situation. Prosecutors, however, focused on whether the attack was premeditated and whether Calvin Glover intended to kill Barry Winchell when he struck him multiple times in the head and the neck with a baseball bat. Calvin's attorneys try and argue that this isn't his fault. This was not premeditated murder because he wasn't in control of his own actions because he had 17 beers that night and he was drinking heavily. He also has low self-esteem. So come on, guys. He had a lot of beers and he has low self-esteem. It's not his fault that he took a baseball bat and beat his fellow soldier to death with it, swinging it about 4 to 5 times. And it's also not his fault because Justin Fisher was the one egging him on. Now, Calpernia also agrees that if not for Justin, Calvin probably wouldn't have done this. And Justin really was pushing this kid. Now, he's a kid. I'm sorry, but 18 feels still like it's a child to me. He's pushing this kid towards committing violence. Calvin's defense is also going to pull out the gay panic defense, trying to say that he was humiliated because of the gay rumors, and that these rumors added fuel to the fire. Justin was adding fuel to the flame because he was saying, "Oh, you got beaten up by a gay man." The trial basically comes down to Calvin swung the bat, but Justin egged him on. And it only took 2 hours of deliberation for this jury to find Calvin Glover guilty, and he is sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole. Barry's family wanted life in prison for Calvin because Barry's mother, Patricia, states, "I believe in someone waking up every morning and having to face themselves and face what they have done." The perception that Barry was gay played into the motive in this murder, and the Army wanted to avoid that issue completely. And Barry's mom says that they have to admit to the harassment that was being done. After Barry Winchell was murdered, it drew national attention to the military's don't ask, don't tell policy. And this policy basically meant that LGBTQ service members could serve if they kept their identity secret. And most people believed this rule helped create a hostile environment where harassment could happen more easily. And because of this public outcry, Secretary of Defense William Cohen ordered a review of the policy to see if it played a role in what happened to Barry. And advocacy groups like the Service Members Legal Defense Network pushed for accountability, asking who in leadership allowed this kind of environment to exist. Winchell's parents, Wally and Patricia, they became strong advocates for re-examining this don't ask, don't tell policy. I mean, they wanted answers and changes to prevent similar tragedies. Barry's mother, Pat, said the soldiers serving don't want to serve under a lie. They want to serve honestly and openly. Barry's parents, they wanted answers, they wanted changes, and not everyone else did. Now, this senior Army official, Timothy Maud, he even met with Patricia to discuss her concerns, but not everyone in leadership agreed with her perspective. Robert T. Clark, who was in charge of the base at the time of the murder, he denied responsibility for any anti-gay culture. And Patricia strongly opposed his promotion, arguing that holding him accountable mattered for honoring her son's memory. And his promotion was delayed for a time, but did eventually go through after he was cleared of wrongdoing. Following the 1999 murder of Barry Winchell, President Bill Clinton admitted that the don't ask, don't tell policy that he had implemented was, quote, out of whack and failing in its intended purpose. In October of 1999, Bill Clinton signed an executive order modifying the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and this change allowed evidence of anti-gay bias or other hate crime factors to be admitted during the sentencing phase of military trials. Calpernia Addams often speaks of her relationship with Barry as a transformative, loving experience, and she described Barry as a sweet, masculine, nice man who made her feel safe and treated her like a lady and accepted her. Calpernia was interviewed for a New York Times article, and she stated that among the transgendered women here in Nashville, we have a jaded understanding of the way it is. And one of the cold, hard facts that we understand is that a lot of the straight men who are attracted to us are actually closeted gay, and they might not even have admitted it to themselves. We bring them into the gay community and introduce them to people, and they start to get comfortable. And the next little step is that they leave us behind and they start dating men. It is really lonely, but Barry seemed to take me at face value. He liked me for me, and as much as that sounds like a cliche, he thought I was beautiful, and he enjoyed our sex life totally. The sexual reassignment surgery, he seemed totally like he didn't care whether that happened or not. I felt comfortable that he wasn't going to use me as a bridge, and I was finally able to really let myself relax and accept his love. Calpernia has continued to express gratitude for the continued honoring of Barry's memory, and she uses this tragedy to highlight the danger of anti-trans bigotry. According to an Out.com article, Calpernia Addams felt deeply shaken and blindsided when Soldier's Girl and the RuPaul Drag Race brought up the murder of her former boyfriend, and especially in unexpected or entertainment context. And even though she has spoken publicly about the tragedy for years, seeing it resurface in a pop culture setting, along with images of her and Barry, it just hit her emotionally in this very sudden way. Because from her perspective, the experience wasn't just about being reminded of the actual event itself, but about how quickly a personal and traumatic moment from her life was turned into part of a TV storyline without warning. She described feeling gobsmacked by how abruptly the memory of Barry's death was brought back into the public eye. In this article, Calpernia describes hanging out with all of her friends. They're about to watch RuPaul's Drag Race, and she says, I was kind of gobsmacked this last Friday because one of the makeover subjects for the Family Resemblance Challenge said that he was an ex-military member who had served at Fort Campbell, Kentucky with Barry Winchell. She states that it was really a shock to see Barry's murder brought up on the Drag Race episode and see his picture come up and then my picture come up. I didn't know this young man who was in the makeover challenge, but I'm sure there were lots of people around Barry that I never met, but I am glad that people still honor his memory. And I think there's still value to be had in letting everyone know that this kind of bigotry and hatred existed in the military. I'm a veteran myself, a combat medic, and so it is a story that I'm grateful to be told. It was very blindsiding to see it, sitting in a living room with my friends, having cocktails, cackling over the queens and their antics. But it has been 27 years, and I guess I can't expect a trigger warning every time this story comes up. After their convictions, Calvin Glover and Justin Fisher were dishonorably discharged, demoted to private, and lost all pay and benefits. They were initially imprisoned at the United States Disciplinary Barracks. Justin Fisher was denied clemency in 2003 and then released in 2006, while Calvin Glover was later moved to a civilian prison and then paroled in 2020. When Calvin Glover was sentenced, he spoke with American Justice, and he told them that the judge looked at him and said, "You are to be confined for the rest of your natural-born life." And Calvin says, this really hurt. When the judge said that to me, it hit me so hard. Those words hit me with such a force that I can't describe, knowing that my life is done. And all it could make me think was being told you are confined for the rest of your natural life. Did those words hit as hard as the blow you delivered with a baseball bat to a sleeping man who never saw it coming? Stay safe and stay paranoid. Residue is created, hosted, written, researched, edited, and produced by me, Chrissy Champagne. Thank you so much for being here. It means the world to me. Residue forever. Stay safe, and I will see you all next Tuesday. Don't forget to hit that follow button. See you soon.